South Asia is home to nearly 2 billion people, yet the economic destinies of three of its most important nations, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, could not be more different. Three countries that began with similar histories now find themselves on drastically diverging paths. Sri Lanka, the island once called the Pearl of the Indian Ocean, was long seen as the region's golden child, educated, prosperous, and full of promise. Pakistan, with its massive population, strong military, strategic location, and rich agricultural base, was viewed as the natural heavyweight. And then there was Bangladesh, the nation born out of war in 1971, so devastated that Henry Kissinger famously dismissed it as a basket case. It had almost no industry, high poverty, and one of the highest fertility rates in the world. But today, this picture has been turned upside down. According to the World Bank and IMF, Bangladesh's income per capita is now higher than Pakistan and Sri Lanka. And its economic model remains far more resilient. How did the poorest of the three nations end up leading the region? To find the answer, we must look at the choices each country made, and the consequences that followed. Bangladesh made one of the smartest economic decisions in South Asia's history. It bet everything on building a large, female-driven manufacturing workforce. Today, more than 4.4 million workers, most of them women, power Bangladesh's garment industry, making it the second largest apparel exporter on earth, after China. This industry did something extraordinary. It pumped steady foreign dollars into Bangladesh every single day. Even during global recessions, people still need clothes. And that stability allowed Bangladesh to grow its exports from only $10 billion in 2005 to nearly $55 billion by 2023. Pakistan, meanwhile, remained stuck exporting raw cotton, yarn, and unfinished textiles, low-value products that earn far less money. And because Pakistan suffers from constant electricity shortages and unpredictable gas supply, many factories cannot run at full capacity. When factories sit idle, buyers shift to Bangladesh instead. Sri Lanka took a different path. Its export economy shrank over time. In 2000, exports made up 33% of Sri Lanka's GDP. By the time the crisis hit, that number had fallen to 15%. Sri Lanka relied heavily on tourism and tea, two sectors extremely sensitive to global shocks. When the Easter bombings devastated tourism in 2019, and COVID shut down global travel in 2020, Sri Lanka's main sources of foreign exchange evaporated almost overnight. Bangladesh built a factory-driven economy, Pakistan stayed stuck in low-value exports, and Sri Lanka relied on services that disappeared when crises arrived. A major difference between the three nations lies in how they borrowed money. Sri Lanka borrowed heavily through international sovereign bonds, short-term commercial loans with very high interest rates. These loans are dangerous because they must be repaid quickly and at expensive rates. By 2022, Sri Lanka's external debt had exploded, with nearly 47% owed to private lenders. This made restructuring nearly impossible. When nearly half of Sri Lanka's foreign debt became owed to private lenders, the country was sitting on a ticking time bomb. And when their export earnings dried up, there wasn't enough foreign currency left to pay for fuel, medicine, or even basic imports. Pakistan faces a different kind of debt crisis. Its debt isn't tied to infrastructure alone, it borrows simply to pay old loans. Pakistan's debt-to-GDP ratio is over 80%, and it repeatedly turns to the IMF, Saudi Arabia, and China just to avoid default every few months. Bangladesh, however, took a far more cautious approach. Most of its foreign loans come from development partners like the World Bank or Japan's JITSA, loans with extremely low interest rates and very long repayment periods. This means Bangladesh's debt remained manageable, and the economy never faced the kind of sudden repayment pressure that destroyed Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka borrowed fast and recklessly. Pakistan borrowed constantly and without reform. One of the most damaging decisions in Sri Lanka's recent history was the sudden 2021 ban on all chemical fertilizers. The government announced it would make Sri Lanka the world's first fully organic farming nation. But modern crops rely on fertilizers to achieve high yields. Removing them overnight causes immediate and severe drops in production. And that is exactly what happened. Rice production fell by nearly a third in one season. Farmers who had cultivated rice for generations saw their fields fail. Tea, Sri Lanka's most important export product, plunged to its lowest production levels in 23 years. With domestic rice supply collapsing, Sri Lanka was forced to import rice for the first time in years, draining even more foreign exchange. This single policy mistake crippled food security and wiped out crucial export earnings. It became one of the most dramatic examples of how a sudden, untested economic idea can break an entire nation. Pakistan's political instability made these problems worse. Pakistan has lived under military rule for almost half its existence. Even in civilian years, governments collapse frequently, policies are rewritten every election cycle, and long-term reforms rarely survive. Political turbulence makes economic planning almost impossible. A policy does not get time to work because the government changes before results can appear. Bangladesh, on the other hand, enjoyed long periods of policy continuity. Even with flaws in governance, its economic direction remained stable enough to attract investment and build trust. Growth rates tell the same story. Bangladesh has posted an average growth rate close to 6 to 7% for nearly 2 decades and even touched 8% before the pandemic, one of the fastest in the world. Pakistan struggles to grow even 2% per year, with several years dipping close to zero because political instability and energy shortages strangle productivity. Sri Lanka once grew impressively, touching 5 to 6%, but years of debt-fueled mismanagement crashed the economy, pushing growth to negative 7.3% in 2022, one of the worst contractions in South Asia's modern economic history. Bangladesh managed to control its population growth rapidly and effectively. In 1971, its fertility rate was 6.9 children per woman. Today, it is about 2.16, close to the ideal replacement rate for a stable, growing workforce. This shift transformed Bangladesh society. Smaller families mean more resources per child, more education, better nutrition, higher savings, and more women entering the workforce. Pakistan's fertility rate remains high at 3.6 in 2023, which means millions of new job seekers every year, but not nearly enough jobs. Sri Lanka, meanwhile, faces the opposite problem. Its fertility rate dropped too low, and the country now has an aging population that requires more healthcare and social spending. Bangladesh sits in the demographic sweet spot. According to the World Bank, Bangladesh life expectancy 75 years, Pakistan life expectancy 68 years, Sri Lanka life expectancy 77 years, but falling due to crisis. Bangladesh made remarkable progress in health, education, and gender equality. Women's participation in the workforce surged. Child mortality and maternal mortality dropped dramatically. Literacy improved across the country. Pakistan lags far behind in nearly all major social indicators. Sri Lanka once led South Asia in social development, but the economic crisis sharply reversed many of those gains. The World Bank estimated that poverty in Sri Lanka doubled between 2021 and 2023. Bangladesh, starting from the lowest point, climbed steadily upward. Bangladesh has kept inflation mostly in the 6 to 9% range, difficult but manageable for a developing nation. Pakistan has battled inflation exceeding 25 to 30%, making food and fuel unaffordable for millions. Sri Lanka faced the worst inflation crisis of all, with prices exploding to nearly 70% in 2022, forcing citizens to stand in long queues for fuel, gas, and essential food items. Inflation is not just a number, it is the daily cost of survival, and in that battle, Bangladesh protected its people far better than its neighbors. Bangladesh invested heavily in practical, export-enhancing infrastructure. The Padma Bridge, Dhaka Metro Rail, new ports, power plants, and expressways directly improved factory output, trade logistics, and supply chains. Sri Lanka invested in glamorous but low-return megaprojects that looked modern but didn't produce enough economic value. Some airports had barely any flights. Some ports had minimal traffic. These projects increased debt without increasing income. Pakistan's infrastructure development under CPEC started strong, but political instability and financial mismanagement limited its impact. Bangladesh focused on what actually creates economic growth. Bangladesh chose stability, discipline, female empowerment, and manufacturing. Pakistan chose inconsistency and political turbulence. Sri Lanka chose risky loans and reckless policies. Bangladesh grew slowly, steadily, and deliberately, one factory at a time, one export order at a time, one working woman at a time. And today, the country once dismissed as hopeless is outperforming both its richer neighbors. The lesson is simple yet profound. Economic miracles are not created by luck. They are created by choices. And in the long race of nations, slow and steady discipline beats flashy dreams and unstable politics every time. Bangladesh chose the long road. And that is why it is winning. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to World Economy for more such videos.